So the next stage of what I want to do is I want to make a bark for the tree itself. I have here a couple of different sized cardboard tubes. So my goal right now is to make a flat piece that is the length of the actual tube of clay, put it on the piece of wood I've got here, and carve it and mold the actual wood bark itself. Then I'm going to make a mold from it, and then what I'll do is I'm going to pour a resin into it and let it set, and as it sets I'm going to make it very thin so I can wrap it around the tube itself. So what I need to do is get my lump of clay. My second thing I should do is in fact mark up where I want this to be in lengthwise. So I'm going to actually mark it up 22 inches in length. Again, I just pulled a piece of scrap wood kind of thing. 22 inches long, and I'm going to make it, I might make it about, I think I'm going to make it 5 inches wide. That gives me plenty of runoff. Okay, so this is going to be my taped out side here of what I'm going to do, and now I'm going to cut a piece of clay. Now, this doesn't need to be thick, it only needs to be very thin to the wood. Because I don't have to build up a lot, and there's not a lot of thickness to what I'm doing. So let's see, this guy here, splice through that. All right, and now let's see if we can mash this out a little bit. So you don't even need that much. And for this particular case, the original mold is going to get destroyed. I don't need to keep it once I've made the cast. Again, it doesn't need to be thick. It just needs to be enough that I can create and carve bark into it. And you can see here the bark in the tree, in the imagery and stuff like that. It's got a lot of a certain look and style to it that I want to reproduce, which to make my Endor forest setting. Trying different methods. I've got different things I can work with. I've got craft sticks that I have paintbrushes I can stipple into it. I've got a little putty knife. Let's see what this does here. Okay, so again, I want these to be kind of a little bit wider at the base as I'm making this stuff. I'm just going to be a little rough at the beginning and go from there. So I'm just trying to get some overall. And again, it starts off rather kind of coarse and rather rough at the beginning, but then I'm going to make these go up. I want to get rid of all these little extra pieces here. If I'm going to do it this way, I need to make sure that my edges are also kind of broken in, because I want to make sure that when I piece them together that I've got some sort of shape. I don't want it to kind of cut off flat. I want it to kind of be a bit more of a overlap of pieces. So as I get up here, I do want to start getting there. I'm going to start from the top and find this midpoint of. This is actually a great tool because I'm actually bending it and twisting it as I go, and I can get different thicknesses out of the piece, and then I could slowly grade them up to be wider where needed. So if you see here, this is what I've done as my general base for my tree bark itself. And this is only just the starting point. You can see it gets wider and wider as I bring it down and tone it. And I'm trying to get the same shape that it's on the actual image of an actual redwood to the left there. So I've started the beginning there. I do want to add some additional textures in there. I'm going to show you those textures right now. And we've got all these little tiny pieces here that I kind of want to get up. All these little rough pieces right now. And sometimes it's easier to go back in and just have something with a bit of a wire brush or a soft brush that I can actually just tap down very lightly on the top there And it's doing one of two things. It's getting rid of all the burrs that are sticking out, but still giving me enough shape. But it's also adding an additional texture to the bark, a very rough, coarse kind of surface area. This is the second technique I've been using just now, where I'm just using a cheap brush just to stipple down and add this additional little texture to the bark, and it's starting to come together. Actually, I'm going to try this a little bit. This is going to help me with some of the breakup in between there. I don't want to lose the depth of those shapes, but I do want to add a bit more kind of line work that goes between them, and something very sharp and very textured. Actually, I'm going to go back in and soften some of my little burrs that I've got there by just tapping down on them. Now, before I can do anything, I'm going to have to let this dry, because I need to have a pretty dry, solid area for the liquid I'm about to pour over the top. You can see here that now I've done a couple of different techniques into my tree branch, and basically it's kind of starting to come together. I'm actually almost happy with what I've got. I'm surprised at how quickly that was. Actually, I was thinking it was going to go longer. And the other thing is that when these get molded, then I gotta have to wrap them in a circular form around before they set. So I've got to figure that part out. But again, you can see there the bottom of the trees are a little wider. The tops of the trees get narrow as they taper in, with a very slow, gradual grade in there. That's what I'm looking for my tree branch. I'm going to get the chance to make the mold. Once this dries, I'm going to build a cardboard frame around it. So my next step before I pour the mold will be I'm going to build a trough around this. When I pour the molding in there, the cast, it'll just have somewhere to stop and won't bleed off into the distance. So I'm going to make it pretty tight to the edge. I'm trying to avoid wasting too much of my mold, since too much of the casting, since it is extremely expensive. I'm going to put a base at the bottom and the top. Just going to cut this. Now I need to make sure I tape along the edge here so it doesn't all slide underneath. So I'm going to use, actually I might just use the cheaper blue tape here. And I'm just going to tape in, make a little barrier, and that way it all stays secure. It's just a waiting game for this to dry, and that way I can now pour in my surface mold over the top to create a actual cast and let it set. But again, I need to let this dry considerably, and it might take a day or two for the clay to dry. So I'm going to come back to this when it's ready to go. So I've let this set over the last day or so. It's now nice and dry on the surface, which means I can actually pour a nice bond over the top of it. I ended up by picking up this stuff. I've never really used it before, first time, but I believe it works really well. Basically smooth on mold star. Now it asked me to make a rubber cast silicone that I can pour over the top of this. And then once it dries, I can pull it off and I've got this mold, and then I can actually put in everything from rubber latex to resins and create reproductions of that particular mold. And as I said before, this is flat, but eventually what I'll do is I'm going to actually make it thin enough when I make the mold so that I can actually bend it in place. What I've got is a couple of cups. I want to mix up. I have to do it, this particular liquid is like 50-50, 1-to-1 basically. So this is a sample kit. It was about $36, which is, kind of up there. But the fact is, I'll have this mold now permanently till it eventually runs down and breaks down and is no longer usable, and I can make as many productions as I can make from it. This is exciting. I'm looking forward to testing out how this all works. So I'm going to put in, I don't know, I think I'm going to go with a full cup of this. And then I'm also going to go with the same amount of this one. So now I'm gonna pour them together, get rid of all the excess out of the actual jar. I should have done this one at a time. I want as much of it going in there as I can to get mixed up. And again, I've got about 30 minutes to get them to properly set. Now for the big mix, and it says to make sure you mix it, make sure that there's no streaks going through it, always get around the edges, make sure the edges are completely streak free. I don't want this to mess up of any sort. Alright, I'm going to start pouring this now. Give myself plenty of coverage. There he is. Let's put that out of the way over there. So I want to make sure I can cover this whole thing. I do have the ability of using up the rest of this just to fill in the areas. Oh wow, my leaking underneath already. Okay, hey, look at that. That came through pretty fast there. That's what happens when you do not put enough tape down. Okay, that will help. I've done as much as I think I can do here. It's now a matter of a 30-minute set time. See how it sets. All right, I've let this now dry and set. Given it ample time to dry. And now I'm going to take it off. I'm going to check and make sure everything looks good by just peeling off the rubber off this, so I can tell that it's set. It's exactly what it's supposed to do. So I can actually now take away some of my tape and the cardboard frame around this. So in that case, let's take out the cardboard first around the edge. Alright, so I'm going to go around this edge here. I'm just going to chop off where it started seeping through a little bit. Give it some strength and see if it holds its shape. Interesting. Okay, that seems to be working nicely. You can see that all the texture's holding its shape. Just want to be very careful on this end here. And yeah, so this has actually come up really nice. I do have to go in and clean it, get rid of all the loose leftover clay. But yeah, I'm really happy with that mold. Came out really nice. I will cut back this little bit of flappy skin here, because the next thing I want to do is prepare it and get it all prepped so I can put in my actual resin and cover it in there and make my tree pieces with. So I've cleaned it all out, and now what I have here is my plastic mold, again in a two-part. It's exactly 50-50 kind of thing. So I'm going to use this in small doses to kind of paint over the top of this. I want to make it pretty thin because I want it to be flexible enough to hopefully bend around my cardboard tube when the time comes. And that's going to be the real trick, because I'm going to have to make multiple of these. I don't want to waste this stuff. It is also about $35. It takes about, what does it say? It takes about 6 or 7 minutes, 10-15 minutes to cure time. So it dries pretty quickly. And I think I'm going to pour it to the bottom of that little ring there. If I have 2 of those, that's 1. Okay. So I've got both of them here. Little pop sticks to mix them, because it seems liquidy enough. All right, so here it is, chemical reaction. The two of them are going together. I now have to get them a good enough stir to mix them all up properly, make it all in there. Let us pour this into here and see what it does. Hopefully that's going to be enough. So it comes across as a liquid. Definitely want to keep it on a flat ground. All right, part of the trial and error of trying to figure this stuff out is to see it is starting to go a little heavier and a little cury. So I want to put a bit of thickness to this. So you can see that the actual resin is starting to cure by turning white inside of there. So right now it's got a misty white throughout. Some areas are drying quicker than others. But it's just very thinly painted on to the inside of the mold. And in the next half an hour or so, this will be completely dry, and I will be able to peel it off and have enough flex to it that I can bend it around another cardboard tube. All right, so midway through drying, I decided I was going to try and bend this over the pipe itself, get the curvature that I was looking for. I just figured not to record it, but all I did was turn it over the top and just tape it down. The plastic seems to have dried now, at least dried enough to have cured. Let's see what it does. I'm hoping I'm not too early. It said about a 30-minute dry time. So I'm going to take this off and we're going to peel this back. See what it does. From my angle, it looks pretty cool. Very thin, but it's starting to form exactly what I'm looking for. Oh, wow. Oh, that's awesome. So you can see here that it's just literally sitting on there. I think that's the way to go. It just literally sitting on there. I'll have to glue it on properly, but it's settling in such a way. Now, there seems to be enough flex on this while it's still in this state. I will eventually want to pull these out a little bit down here and make them like the base of the tree wider. But I'm extremely ecstatic on how that first one looks. And all I have to do is go in there and just hot glue the edges down to the cardboard tube. This is awesome. This is making me really happy right now. But yeah, the next piece I'll put on, I'm going to put to the side there. I have to make at least 2 per large tree though, so I can get them to cover properly and evenly.